going on, Los Angeles? What's up, Ramley? Welcome to the Rams Skinny here on the LA Football Network. Tough day in Los Angeles for the Rams, or I guess it was technically in Dallas, but everyone watching in Los Angeles as the Rams fall to the Cowboys 43-20. It probably wasn't even that close as the score indicates. Just an absolute demolition and so many mistakes and, just a continued story of what this Rams team could be and what they are not. And we're going to get all into it. Joined as always here on the Rams Skinny by my man, Ryan Skinny T. Anderson. What's up, my man? How was the weekend besides this game?
Well, still a little under the weather, still a bit scratchy in the throat, but not a fantastic game to watch for sure. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, it seemed like, but we'll dig into the game for sure. Definitely feeling like fall in Los Angeles this morning. Nice and chilly. My house was built in 1909 in California, which means it has zero insulation. So while it's a chilly, sub 50 degrees out there, it feels like a chilly 40 something degrees in here.
Yep, I get that. I know. I always laugh how everyone's like, "Oh, you don't get it cold." I'm like, you don't get it because at night, at winter, it drops in the 40s, sometimes high 30s up here in our areas of Pasadena, Highland Park, and without the insulation, and I mean, even the windows are just like prehistoric, and they don't even close all the way. I mean, we had windows at our old apartment that were just like the stacked panes, and so you like pinch them shut, and there's still like inches of gap between them where just air is coming in. So yeah, I've woken up many times where it's like sub 50 in my apartment, and like, yeah, this is not a fun way to wake up. But anyway, rough game. Real quick, this show or this episode of the Rams Skinny brought to you by our new friends at Underdog Fantasy. Make sure to head to underdogfantasy.com or go to the App Store or Google Play and download the Underdog Fantasy app. When you make your first deposit, make sure to use our promo code Rams Skinny. That's all one word. No, sorry, Rams LAFB. That's all one word, Rams LAFB. It's going to give you a welcome bonus, match bonus up to $500. So you put in $500, they're going to give you $500 free dollars to play with. You put in 100, you get 100. You can play fantasy on there as a typical fantasy sports, or what we like is the pick'em, and we're going to put up pick'em stuff up on LAFB Network for you to kind of follow along. But basically, you pick between 2 and 5 players of any sports, and you're playing against their odds on whatever Underdog Fantasy gives out there. It's a ton of fun. You can win up to 20 times your money. So I like to do it. It's a lot of fun. It just makes other games more fun to watch if you have kind of players riding on that. So Underdog Fantasy, use promo code Rams LAFB. Tell them the guys at the Rams Skinny sent you. 43-20, Skinny T. And like I said, it didn't even feel that close. It was rough from the beginning. Give me your overall thoughts. We're going to talk. We're going to break down the game for probably 5 minutes, and then we're going to get into big picture and what this Rams team does from here, because there's a lot of questions. Obviously, the Matthew Stafford injury, which we'll get into. Do they make a trade or a free agent acquisition? Do they ride out with Brett Rypien? Do they still fight for the playoffs? Do they pack it in? Like, there's so many underlying storylines here besides just this big loss. But first, just what's your overall thoughts of this brutal loss in Dallas?
Well, this is the kind of game that happens in a season, definitely, and something that we didn't see as unexpected heading into this game. We saw that it would potentially a bad matchup, and that's what it really proved to be. The Rams defense had allowed only 4 passing touchdowns all season heading into this game. In this game, they doubled that. Dak Prescott threw for 4 touchdowns. And, the youth and inexperience really started to rear its ugly head. And, one of the phases of the game that really showed itself was in special teams. There was a blocked punt that resulted in 2 points. And there was a big return that was allowed, a 63-yard return by Dallas that set up another 7 points there. And when you look at the kind of fringes of the team, that's where youth and inexperience and lack of talent can really show its rear its ugly head. Like I was saying, there was 2 really bad blown blocks on that punt block that happened. Michael Hoyt was one culprit in there on that one, and then the long snapper allowed another guy to get through that actually caused the block punt. And then missed tackles left and right, both on defense and on special teams. So those are the just kind of things that lead to the blowout. After that pick six, I stepped away from the game, went into the kitchen to, make a cup of tea or grab a bite to eat or something like that. And I come back and then all of a sudden they're down by, a collective 16 more points. They were down just in a short span of time.
Yeah.
And, that's just, as bad as the offense and the defense did play, that's just the nail in the coffin right there. It's really hard to come back when you're down. I think it was something like 26-7 or 10 or something at that point. But those are kind of overarching thoughts. But I think the defense really came unraveled, and it wasn't even the defensive front. It was all of those, errors in the defensive secondary that caused this. Missed tackles from everybody across the board. Even Ernest Jones kind of missed a couple in there as well. But heck of a job containing the run on this one. Cowboys couldn't run on the Rams on Sunday. So if there's one good takeaway, and they got themselves a kicker that can make a few field goals here and there.
Yeah, there you go. Luckily I was able to get a nice big bowl of menudo from Guadalupe's and Azusa that got me through the game. And so that was quite delightful and delicious. But yeah, rough game all around. I don't need to rehash a lot what you said. I think as we've said all season long, this defense has been better than expected. And this young secondary specifically has kind of surprised and really played almost above their skill set. And they were, to a lack of better words, exposed in this one and weren't able to contain. And you see, Derion Kendrick with another kind of rough game, a low PFF grade of 46.1, third lowest on the team. Duke Shelley, who they brought in, who didn't play a ton of snaps, but those 9 snaps he did play were not great. 9 missed tackles, so not as bad as it's been. I know this is a team that generally struggles with missed tackles, but it's still 9 that led to some big plays potentially, and they just weren't able to get it done, when necessary. And when, like you said, when you get down that early, and the offense didn't help, obviously, putting them in bad situations, it's tough to really come back from that and get into a rhythm. And once the offense, football, we've said this many times, football is such a momentum swinging game. And once you get all that momentum, it is so hard to break that. The great teams can. And this Rams team has shown great fight, but they're just not a great team right now. And so when you get down behind the 8 ball, like unless you have those great players on every side and every level, which they do have, one seemingly at each level, but it just wasn't enough to kind of bounce back. And like you said, when you're down, I think it was 26-3. It was for sure 19-3. And then I think it went to 26-3 or 26-6, maybe. It's just, it's at that point, you're kind of playing for pride and there's not a whole lot you can do. So disappointing loss, disappointing how they came out after the tough loss last week. I picked the Rams to win this game because I thought, okay, the way this season's gone is they have a down week, then they have an up week, and they have a down week, they had an up week. So this was their up week after losing to the Steelers. But unfortunately it wasn't so. And this is going to be the season defined by what could have been. Skinny T, like 3-5 right now, could easily be 5-3 when you look at that Steelers game, when you look at that Bengals game, when you look at, even some of the others, this one not included. And they're a 3-5 football team. And they've got a lot of big questions now heading into the Packers this week. And then they got the bye after that. And obviously the trade deadline is tomorrow afternoon. And so we'll get into that in a minute. Any other thoughts on yesterday's game? I really don't think we need to spend a lot of time because it was just a day of disaster in Dallas.
Yeah, the last thing I want to touch on is the offensive line struggled mightily today. Gave up plenty of pressures, only a couple of sacks. But it just goes to show you how thin they are at this position. And I was just kind of noodling around over there on Over the Cap and looking at Joe Noteboom's contract and Brian Allen's contract, both guys that aren't playing that much. Noteboom more so than Brian Allen, but they're collective $28 million against the cap in 2024. And just kind of interested to, now as we're starting to turn our eyes towards 2024 more and more so, we'll kind of get into that with this Stafford broken thumb situation, injured thumb situation. what does this outlook look like going into 2024? It's really fascinating. And what does this team want to be for the rest of the season? We got nine more weeks in front of us, and that's I think that'll take up the rest of our time, is just talking about what does this team want to be 2023 for the rest of the season.
Yeah, exactly. So let's turn to that. Because just a rough game we'll move past. We'll obviously want to, if you're a player, you need to watch the film and see what went wrong. But as what we're doing, I think we can move on past it rather quickly. We'll do the 24-hour thing and move on by and look ahead. And you said it. You got the Packers this week. Then you have a bye, and then you kind of go down the home stretch at the second half of the season. The bye kind of came at a really opportune time for this team, and maybe needed it this week as opposed to next week. But as it sits right now, the Rams 3-5 are 10th in the NFC. You said it best before we hit the record button that there's seemingly 6 true playoff teams in the NFC. You've got, the 4 division winners, which as of right now look like the Eagles, the Seahawks, the Lions, and the NFC East is really NFC South is really up for grabs. The Falcons currently sit as the division lead, but the Saints have the same exact record, 4-4, and even the Buccaneers are at 3-4, who can potentially make some noise. So one of those teams will get an automatic bid with their divisional win. Then after those 4, you have the Cowboys, who just beat the Rams, and you have the Niners. Both those teams, I think, will probably make the playoffs, as they're one of the better teams in this conference. And in that 7th spot is absolutely up for grabs. Currently, you have the Vikings sitting there at 4-4, but they just lost their star quarterback, Kirk Cousins, for the entire season with a torn Achilles. And then you have the Saints, as mentioned, the Buccaneers, and the Rams are all right there. After that, you got the Commanders and the Packers, and I don't think anyone's expecting Giants, Bears, Panthers, or Cardinals to make a run. So there's still a huge opportunity for this team to make a run and claim that 7th spot and get into the dance. You never know what happens. So a number of ways we can go with this skinny team. One is what they do at quarterback. And as of the time of this recording, it has not been announced, I don't believe, the severity of Matthew Stafford's injury. You would expect him, based on the rap he got and based on not coming back in the game, which actually that doesn't really mean anything because they were down so much. Why would you put him in risk? Expect him to at least miss this Packers game, because then you have the bye after that. So let's do this first. Let's look at just strictly the quarterback position. Do you go sign an available free agent, which there's not a huge selection of? You have Carson Wentz. You have some other guys that have been journeyman backups, essentially. I think Nick Foles is out there. Or do you make a trade before tomorrow night for maybe someone else's backup, say a Trey Lance with Dallas or something like that, as you just be able to send? I'm not saying we'll make a blockbuster trade. I'm saying like a mid to late round pick for someone else's backup that would be seemingly better than what is available in the free agency. Or do you say, let's see how Brett Rypien can spin it for 1 week against this Packers team that is not very good either, only 2 wins, and let's rely on our run game and hopefully our defense can bounce back? Like, what do you think? Not what they will do, what do you think they should do in those 3 scenarios?
Oh, man, it's a tough one, because I think that Sean McVay is such a competitive guy and just kind of a natural-born winner. He wants to get the best out of every situation. He wants to win games. He does not like to lose games. So I would say that, if Matthew Stafford goes on to the IR, which is at least 4 weeks, that'll miss, that they entertain one of these scenarios. And I think that probably most likely it would be a free agent signing. And, we saw it last year, kind of going down the stretch, they picked up Baker Mayfield. Obviously last year wasn't going to be a chase for the playoffs, but Sean McVay still wanted to bring in a guy, Baker Mayfield, that could make some waves for them. And he did in certain games, kind of raised the floor of that backup quarterback position for the Rams. And so I think that's kind of a similar situation into this year, where he sees that there's some winnable games out there and he wants to put his team in the best position possible. And I think that's probably the best thing he can do for this very young and inexperienced team is field a competitive roster week in and week out. They've never seemed like a team that's just going to pack it in and say we're going to lose the rest of the way. They got about $4 million in cap space to play with, and I think they're gonna go after one of those guys, and I think that Carson Wentz is probably the most interesting guy that's available. This list that I'm looking at doesn't seem to be the most trustworthy. And forgive me that I don't remember if Trevor Siemian is on a roster somewhere or not, but they also have Brett Rypien is available. He is obviously not, but Joe Flacco is out there. Nick Foles is out there. What about Chase Daniels, a familiar face to those LAFB people out there playing for the Chargers there last year? Had got some snaps as a starting quarterback. Met a person out at Chargers camp. Nickname for Chase Daniels is Chorizo, according to her. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Chorizo is obviously a fantastic sausage, but not necessarily what you want your quarterback to be nicknamed. But so I think that's I think that's probably the way they're going to go. I think the trade is still on the table. I kind of like that Trey Lance idea, just to maybe they can stick it in the eye of some of those 49ers fans, those hated 49ers fans out there, and turn that guy into something viable as a quarterback. The Rams, I always think of the Rams as a soft landing spot, just because of how it's hard to call a head coach a loving kind of a loving kind of guy, but I feel like Sean McVay is a loving head coach. Yes. And the system isn't as rigid as it is in San Francisco, where everything goes through the mind of the twisted mind of Kyle Shanahan. There's a little bit more improv involved in the Rams. So I think I think that's a really entertaining thing, and it seems like the Titans have a couple of quarterbacks they could part with now that it looks like Will Levis might be the guy going ahead there. Tannehill didn't look great, but proven quantity at least. So I don't know. What are play out some of those scenarios from your perspective?
Yeah, I think. First off, let me say this. If you're a Rams fan, if you could find any solace in yesterday, at least the Niners have now lost 3 straight. So that I'm sure that's one good thing for Rams fans out there. But yeah, I think it really all comes down to the severity of Stafford's injury. And if he's not going to go on IR, if they find out that today or whenever they find out today or tomorrow, that he, and again, if you're listening to this and we didn't know yet, we'll try to update everyone. So don't yell at us. But as of the time of this recording, we don't officially know. If it is a sprain or something that they think he can come back after the bye, then I think they probably roll with Brett Rypien next week. They'll probably add some real low level guy or off the practice squad. Obviously, you got to go into the game with 2 quarterbacks in case anything happens. And they'll roll with it, Brett Rypien, get the bye, and then Stafford comes back and they're good to go. If he has to go on IR, I think they'll absolutely do something. And we still have no idea what's going on with Stetson Bennett. I don't foresee him coming back at all throughout the season. I don't think that would be a viable option anyway. Even if he was back, he hasn't been with the team since, preseason. So then I don't want to speculate what's all going on there. So we won't get into that. But a few things that I could see happening besides the one you said, of those free agents out there. I think the Trey Lance thing is very interesting because obviously he is 3rd right now on the Cowboys depth chart because we saw Cooper Rush yesterday. We did not see Trey Lance. So someone out there now, based on his lack of understanding of the Shanahan offense in 3 seasons, I know he was injured, but you still had all that time, and it still seemed like he wasn't quite grasping the offense. It might be tough to expect him to come in to LA and grasp the Rams offense, which I agree is a little simpler or a little McVay does a good job of getting guys up to speed quicker, but it's a tough task to say, hey, you got a week to learn this offense and run this thing. So, but it could be interesting. And it's a guy that has a really high ceiling that's still only, what is he, 23 years old, 24 years old. So maybe you end up getting a gem there for the future also. I think some other scenarios that are in that trade market, not just a trade market, but guys that are worth looking at. Obviously there's a relationship with the Detroit Lions, and Teddy Bridgewater is the backup to Jared Goff. And obviously the Lions are very happy with Jared Goff. And, you never want to give up a good backup because you see what happens now with the Rams. You see what's happened around the league with all the, the Vikings the Vikings are going to be going after someone as well because they're in that same playoff scenario. So there's going to be some bidding wars out there because you have two teams that could viably fight for the playoffs. They're now both without starting quarterbacks. The Vikings a little more serious because it's for the entire year now. But I think Teddy Bridgewater, there's a relationship, and the Lions obviously are not going to trade Bridgewater to the Vikings in their division. Rams have a relationship. They've done trades before. Obviously, their GM is a former Ram and whatnot. So that's one to look for. I think that could be interesting. You mentioned Chase Daniel. I think that's interesting if he's still in shape. Obviously, he's been doing a YouTube podcast now this season. So is he still in quarterback shape? But he's been around the league for a long time. And then the other one there was another one that I was thinking that now I am drawing a blank on. Maybe it'll come back to me, but I think there's some other options out there as backups. You could really go, I think, and potentially make a move. Oh, Jacoby Brissett was the other one I was thinking as a guy that's been a journeyman all over the place. And, Washington's going nowhere fast. They also have Tyler Heineke, I believe. So, I mean, those are two guys that could come in and potentially be better than what they have on the roster. So long-winded answer of saying, if Matthew Stafford's not going on IR, I don't think they do anything other than adding a real low-level guy to be a backup for this week. If he goes on IR, I think they make a move, whether it's through free agency or whether it's through trading for a backup. And again, not making a blockbuster trade, trading a mid to late round pick for one of those guys. But unfortunately, that betting, it might actually be a little higher than usual just because the Vikings are also going to be bidding for a quarterback. So teams are going to have a little bit more ammo. But that's what I think. We'll see, though.
Yeah, it also seems like Arizona is going to they're in the Kyler Murray business a little bit longer. It seems like they're going to roll with him. Obviously within division there as well. So, but they've got quarterbacks available. Taylor Heineke actually played last week. He is a Atlanta Falcon. He was
right.
Yeah.
Can't keep track of backup quarterbacks.
They also have a couple of guys that somebody's should leave that place as well.
Yeah, and the Rams have history with them, obviously trading Van Jefferson over to the Falcons. Maybe there's their GM on speed dial. They could get one of their backups back.
Yeah, but you're looking at this playoff picture, and Sumer Sports does a playoff probability, and they're looking at just over 20%. They're giving the Rams to make the playoffs. So it's kind of like that old Dumb and Dumber. You're saying there's a chance for us to get in. But just looking at how competitive the Rams like to be, and they like to think of themselves as. But this, you're looking at a starting quarterback with an injured thumb on his throwing hand. I mean, I just don't see them coming back just after a couple of weeks. So it just seems like IR is where they're heading for this. There was questions about Justin Herbert on an injured finger on his non-throwing hand. It just seems it's so hard to think of them going forward with Brett Rypien under center. So. But like you said, the quarterback market, and just with a couple hours really heading into a trade, how quickly can they make this happen? It's going to be fascinating. It's fascinating heading into tomorrow, and we're going to learn a lot. As soon as this news comes out, exactly what they're. Do you think there's a chance that IR happens and they roll with Rypien as quarterback?
There's always a chance. I think if they do that, that tells you though that they're they're fine kind of, hey, if we surprise people, make the playoffs, great, but we're okay just kind of riding this thing out and going into the offseason planning for 24. Because I don't think any competitive, and this, I don't want to sound insulting to Brett Rypien, but I don't think any competitive coach or GM thinks that they can win, a majority of games with Brett Rypien at the helm. You figure that's 3 games that have to play because you got 4-week IR, you include the bye week in there, and if Stafford comes back immediately after, so that's 3 games, and conceivably you got to go probably 2-1 in those games to stay in the conversation. And even though the competition is not, let's just look at this schedule for the rest of the way. You got the Packers next week, then you get the Seahawks after the bye, then you get the Cardinals. So I mean, you play good football, you should go 2-1 in that stretch. You should be able to beat the Packers. You should be able to beat the Cardinals. Seahawks is a division game, so no matter who's playing, it's always a toss up there. But do you get that done with Brett Rypien? Do you think he gives you enough of a shot, or do you need to add one of these other guys that doesn't know the offense? I mean, it's such a hard, like you said, the trade deadline's in 24 hours. And so is it one of those where they think one of these guys can come in, and another guy I didn't even mention, Jameis Winston down in New Orleans? Like, if I'm Jameis Winston's agent, or if I'm Jameis Winston, I'm going to my agent and saying, hey, I like it down here. Get on the call with Les Snead. Because look at Baker Mayfield. He was kind of dead in the water, goes to the Rams, kind of has this little resurgence, and now he's the starter in Tampa Bay. So you never know what can happen when you come to LA and maybe have a few good games in a stretch run, and it gives you another opportunity. And Jameis Winston hasn't had that since leaving Tampa, really. So if I'm someone like him, if I'm Teddy Bridgewater, like I mentioned already, like I'm getting on the call and saying, let's talk to LA and see what we can make happen. Because I think the talent level of those guys, the arm talent, gives the Rams a better shot down that stretch. But again, it's how quickly you learn the playbook and how much you got. If you're McVay, you got to dumb it down to make it viable. But I mean, if you go 2-1 while Stafford's out, all of a sudden you're, what'd that put you at? 5-5 or 5-6, 5-6, and then your home stretch. You got the Browns, toss up. Ravens is probably a loss, so that puts you. Let's just say they lose both those. That puts you at 5-8. Commanders, let's say a win, 6-8. Saints, let's just say because you got to have it, it's a win, 7-8. Giants a win, 8-8, and then you go into the Niners game, 8-8 with the real shot at the playoffs. So I mean, there's a real path here where this team goes 8-9, 9-8, and sneaks into that 7th spot. But it's all going to come down to what the Rams do in the next 24 hours, or whether they hold pat, or whether they just sign a free agent off the street. And it's really going to be fascinating because it's going to tell a lot what this team believes they can do in this season, or if they're just planning for next year.
Yeah, and I think Jameis Winston has become my favorite, just right off the board there. I think that's a great call. Right. I would love to see Jameis Winston.
Give me a W.
Just ripping it, hitting Tutu Atwell, just stretching the field. He had LASIK surgery a couple of years ago, so he's gotten the jersey colors figured out now. So I think he's going to throw a few fewer crazy balls. Man, I love that one for the Rams. I think that's a high ceiling way to go. He's got a low floor, but I think that he's better than Carson Wentz, I think, in a lot of ways. He's still in the league, so I think that proves something right there. I just want to throw this out there for all those Twitter GMs out there that are just maybe scratching their chin about Tom Brady, maybe Matt Ryan. Well, for one, we saw what Matt Ryan could be. His arm is completely fallen off last season in Indianapolis. So let's just scratch that one off your list. And then Tom Brady is a part owner in the Las Vegas Raiders. I don't think you can just kind of play for a team and as a partial owner. I don't think you can divest yourself that quickly to get on a team's roster that quickly. So just scratch both of those guys off your list, and let's get on the Jameis Winston bandwagon here. And I think that's the right answer. Les Snead, I know you watch this show. You're constantly he's sliding into my inbox constantly. So hey man, let's do it. Let's go after Jameis Winston here.
There you go. You heard it here first on the Rams Skinny. I love how you politely said slides into your inbox and not your DMs. Made it a little more professional, I guess, that way. Um,
I
yeah,
I'm so old. I'm so old. I couldn't think of it. That's I can't think of what the kids are calling these things. The inbox. Slide into my inbox. Nobody
you should
says
have said
that.
mailbox. Slide into my PO box.
Yeah, he's licking a stamp right now and
Yeah,
sending me a snail mail.
yeah,
Forget it.
yeah. And last thing I'll kind of say about this, as Mia comes sauntering in here, it just shows how valuable it is when teams put a emphasis and priority on the backup quarterback, because if your QB gets injured, which happens quite a lot throughout the league, you have a viable option and you're not scrambling. And B, if you're healthy, all of a sudden your backup quarterback is a hot commodity and you can get draft capital based on that. And the Rams, unfortunately, basically since McVay's been here, have really put a de-emphasis on whoever the backup quarterback is and have constantly had to scramble whenever anyone's got injured. We've seen it multiple times when Goff got injured and then Walford goes down and you kind of are scrambling doing that. And then we've obviously seen it with Stafford and what they've had to do over the last 2 years. And so, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, but it does show the value of emphasizing a good backup. And you see teams like the Eagles that won a Super Bowl with the backup quarterback. Even right now, I didn't mention his name, but Marcus Mariota is their backup. So, for God forbid, if something happened to Jalen Hurts, they have a very capable backup. Or that's even a name that the Rams may call Howie Roseman and say, what's the cost for Marcus Mariota? Because it's a guy that it's not a franchise guy. We've seen that, but can he come in and win you 2 out of 3 games? I think he probably could, and he could run a style of offense that McVay runs. Jameis Winston is a valuable backup. Those are number 1 and number 2 overall picks that are backups for teams that can come in and win you football games. And the Rams obviously, had for a long time undrafted guys as their backups, and now they have Brett Rypien, who was a very late round pick, even may have been undrafted, and was with the Broncos for a number of years as a third string guy for many of those years. So, it just shows the emphasis, and whether they change that in this offseason or not, especially when you have a quarterback that, I hate saying Stafford's injury prone, but at his age, there's going to be things that happen. This is a freak thing, obviously hitting your thumb, but you should have a contingency plan that doesn't require you to go trade assets for someone's backup or sign someone off the streets 8 weeks into the season. So it's a little unfortunate that they haven't prioritized that, but it's going to make it fascinating for us to see what they do now over the next 24, 48, 72 hours.
Yeah, and I think it makes it really interesting what they're going to do long term as well. Is I think 2024 Stafford was also going to be the guy, and I don't think a thumb injury is a long term thing that they have to be really concerned about. But does this change the calculus of what they're looking at heading into the draft for 2024, where they've got a draft pick in the first round for the first time since 2016, first time of the McVay era, where they're going to be able to draft, first rounder, 3. I keep saying 3 in the top 100, which is incredible. And
a lot of ammo.
A lot of ammo. Most they've had in a very, very long time. And what are they going to do? What are they looking at for that 2024 pick? Are they looking quarterback? I wouldn't say so, even with this injury. But you're looking at I just mentioned how Matt Ryan kind of fell off of a cliff in his last couple of years. We've seen it several times with quarterbacks in their mid to late 30s, where it just kind of seems like they stop working. They stop, something stops happening. Tannehill really fell off of a cliff. You look at Phillip Rivers, Peyton Manning. You don't remember exactly how old he was in that season, where it was just like that arm, it stopped working. They stopped oiling it or something like that. And then you look at a guy like Tom Brady, who played into his 40s, and that just shows you that he's such an outlier.
It's not the norm.
It's not. Yeah, you look at all these other guys where it just stops working, and that's. I don't know if that's a question going forward with Stafford, but it's got to be somewhere in the back of their minds. Is this guy's keeps getting hurt. We got to get him more protection. Havenstein went down. Noteboom goes in there and gives up pressures, gives up a sack, I think, in that instance. And it's this team heading into 2024 has lots of questions, and the quarterback is becoming one of them. And if you have all of these assets right now, are you looking to trade for a guy that could move into a starting role? Chicago Bears, are they going to trade? Are they going to trade Justin Fields at some point? Tyson Bagent, my guy. The Rams can still go out and get him. Maybe
that's your guy. That's right. And we'll have so much time in the offseason to talk what this draft looks like. I think what's beneficial for the Rams, just because of the way they operate and the way Sean McVay operates, I don't think they'll have the opportunity to take a guy like Caleb Williams or Drake May. I think they're, regardless if they make any moves or not, they're still going to win 3 or 4 more games, I think, this year and finish in that, 10 to 15 range. So I think those guys are out, but this is a very quarterback heavy draft class. I mean, you look at guys like the 2 I just mentioned, when you look at Michael Penix Jr., I mean, we can go down the list of all the Pac-12 Bo Nix. I mean, just the Pac-12 alone has a bunch of guys that are going to be worth drafting, and you can do those in the mid first round or even, an early second, mid second round, the guys that have high ceilings that they can maybe not come in and start right away in 24. But if they, like you said, either Stafford, they let ride out his contract or at least ride out another season, but they have that guy developing behind him. Or if they go make one of these moves for a Jameis Winston or whatever, maybe he's a guy that can spot start next year while this guy develops. If he's not ready, even if you do get top 1 pick, they're not always ready right off the bat. So it's going to be fascinating what they do. Literally this week is going to tell us so much about what this Rams team wants for this season and whether they believe they can contend this season, or they're kind of like, hey, we're going to stay competitive. We're still going to compete, but we're not going to make any moves that do anything to deter what we want to do in 24 with our draft capital. And we're just going to kind of write this out with who we got. So it's going to be fun to watch, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope that something exciting happens before the trade deadline. If not for the Rams, some team, I would love to see something dramatic and exciting happen. It makes for a great time, and the NFL, does such a great job at creating these spectacles. So let's hope that there's a spectacle just dangling out there waiting for us.
Yes. Well, this is recording at Monday morning. So if anything happens from now until tomorrow's trade deadline on Halloween, I think Skinny T and I will be hopping back on to break it down, and we'll have plenty of content over at LAFBnetwork.com. Plenty of editorial and obviously all of our social content you can find at LAFB Network or Rams_LAFB. Well, thanks for hanging out with us, guys. Rough Sunday, but hey, it's going to be a really interesting and fascinating future for this Rams team. Excited to see it all unfold and whether this team still makes a viable run at the playoffs, as they still have plenty of ammo to get there, sitting only a game behind that 7th spot and coming up against some easier competition to get it done with. So we'll see what happens at quarterback. We'll keep everyone posted. For Skinny T, I'm Ryan Dyrud. This is the Rams Skinny on the LA Football Network. Talk to you guys all soon.